Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today I want to share with you 5 key things that I've learned since I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's been about a year and a half now, and in that time it feels as though I've sort of settled into the DnD game. I feel much more comfortable and confident now than I did when I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And in some respects it feels very similar to what it was like when I was learning to drive. I did my lessons and passed my test in my late 20s, so it's quite recent for me, this thought and this feeling of being slightly out of control when I first got into that car. All the things I had to know and learn how to do, the pedals, the gear stick, the steering wheel, the signalling, the mirrors, being aware of everything going on around me, not having a crash, all that stuff was actually quite unnerving when I was starting. But there was this moment when it all sort of clicked for me, and the actual mechanics of driving the car sort of sank into the background, and suddenly I was driving the vehicle. I was actually in control of the thing. I was aware of not only what was right in front of the car, but also actually what was in the middle distance. I was aware of the vehicles around me quite naturally, using the mirrors, because that felt like the thing. It just felt very natural, like the thing you had to do in order to do that. I was much more confident and comfortable, and therefore actually a safer driver as well. And in that sense, my D&D sort of year and a half has been like that. I've become a much more confident D&D player, much more aware of my options in particular, and in that sense, a more productive D&D character. I'm now thinking not only how to play the game, but also actually what would my character do in the game, but also what can I get out of this game as a sort of collaborative storytelling experience. So yeah, 5 things that I've learned in the past year and a half. Number 1, dice. Now that may sound obvious. Of course I turned up day one with dice. I bought dice, in fact, before I even sat down to play Dungeons and Dragons. D&D is probably the most famous tabletop RPG, and famously it uses a D20. In fact, there are lots of RPGs that rely on the D20 in particular for deciding the outcome of certain activities or moments or challenges or actions. And typically 20, especially if you roll a 20, a natural 20, means you've utterly succeeded at that task. So if you roll a 20 when you're trying to kick a door in, the door just shatters and you sort of burst through, and it's crucial to how you play the game. It decides all the variables of the story that you're telling, the dice. And the thing I've learned is have plenty of dice. This is actually a dice bag that my lovely wife made. This is actually our joint pool of dice. Quite a fair few. It's actually based on a D20 itself, in fact, this dice bag. I love it. But crucially, have plenty of dice. Don't just have one of each, because often, especially as you level up in your character, you're going to require maybe 3d6 6-sided dice to decide the outcome of maybe a magical spell or something. Potentially you might find yourself rolling for someone else who isn't there that evening. Maybe someone's sick or ill or something, and you sort of pick up the spare dice to sort of represent them. Having enough dice, knowing about the dice is crucial, but so too is being honest with your rolls. The temptation early on was to, fudge the edges. If other people, in particular the DM, didn't quite see what I'd rolled, I might have been tempted to, and a couple of occasions I did, improve the roll as I picked up the dice. I went, oh look, it's not a 7, it's a 17, this kind of thing. But very, very quickly I learned that I wasn't winning at D&D. I wasn't cheating and therefore achieving, not unlike, for example, if you, I don't know, in poker or something, where there's a finish to the round and you go, aha, look at these cards, how's them apples? Rather, all you're doing really is actually cheating yourself of an unfolding, natural, randomized experience in that sense. So actually, don't cheat with the dice. Don't pretend you've got a higher number than you have, because that can, a negative outcome, just as in life, to a given action or activity, can often result in positive side effects for your character and for the story and for the sense of jeopardy as well. If you're in a dungeon, or if you're in the sewers and you roll a low number when this acid ball or something's coming at you, then roll with the punches and find an exciting and adventurous way out of that problem. Dice and how to handle them, crucial. Number 2, for me at least, is keep a notebook. This is the notebook I use for my D&D campaign, and it's a particularly nice one actually. It's got a lovely texture to it and a sort of magnetic lip on it, and I've doodled all over the inside of the cover while I've just been sort of listening to the DM describe what's happening next, or people deciding on what they're going to do next. But crucially, I use this book to keep a note of what my character has learned and who they've met, where they've been, and also actually I did a little bit of background research on the setting of this D&D campaign. There's a world map that our DM has presented us with. There's a city map for the main city that we're in, which is Procampa city. Actually, that's a small portion of the city there. There's the main city map just there. And what this means is that actually I was able to gain a little bit of insight into the potential story just by reading around the history of the city in D&D lore. The city that we're in was called Proscampula or something like that, and it was actually a dwarven city with humans living above. And then something happened whereby it mainly became a human city, and the dwarven city was sort of abandoned. Think Moria, but with a sort of a slightly dark, twisted, sort of magical disease, plague-ish edge. I also make little sketches of things that we found. Like there's a necklace here that investigation reveals that the amulet could be twisted, and it turns out that thing is like a switch that can be used to control someone with a magical spell. A notebook, for me at least, so far has been really helpful for remembering little details, making connections in the campaign, and I suspect, and actually already, it's a lovely thing to look back on, to remember the adventures that you've been on. So a notebook, for me at least, is crucial. Number 3, remember your character and try to play in character. It helps if you have a clear idea of what your character is and what they're trying to achieve, and this is to a certain extent sort of part of the construction of the character. So on the character sheet you will have things that are motivators and things which are weaknesses or things which are secrets that you can draw on for your character. But it helps to have a sense of what your character is going to be doing in any given moment, and I'll come back to that in just a moment, in fact. But crucially, your character and the way that different characters, especially contrasting characters, interact can really yield very satisfying story moments. There was a moment when we were in the Temple of Talos, the god of thunder and destruction, and I, as a dwarven bard, Yuri, decided actually to invite some of the guards in the temple to a gig. I thought, well, I'm going to be performing at the pub tonight. As a bard, I can always find somewhere to perform in order to hire a bed for the evening. And so I thought I'd be cheeky, invite the guards along, and actually a couple of them did turn up to the gig. It sort of enriches the story. It makes you feel quite good that you're fulfilling that character in some respects. And actually, the contrast to that was in the same moment, another member of the party playing as a tiefling, a sort of a half demonic human. She was being actually really rather cheeky. She was trying to sort of get her weasel her way into this temple, and it just wasn't quite working. So my approach got the guards to come along to a gig. Her approach very much got us chucked out eventually. So play your character, and out of that will come story, especially in conjunction with the story that the DM has in mind as well. Number 4, crucially, always be imagining. I made a terrible mistake in an abandoned mine. We had travelled up to a town or village called High Hasper in the mountains, where a dwarven mine had been ravaged by orcs, and we were there sort of clearing out the mine of an orcish presence, but also actually investigating what was behind that presence. It turned out that there was a dragon deep in the mountain. And I had sort of forgot, I suppose, to really imagine where I was. I wasn't fully mentally in the mine at a certain point when it felt like everything was safe, everything was fine. We'd just fought off what seemed like the final wave of orcs, and I wanted to see what was round a corner on a map, if you see what I mean. And we were looking at this map, and I went, well, I'm going to go to there. And I forgot to mention that I was going to go there sensibly, you know, sort of sneaking, not stomping along in my dwarven armor with all the gear bouncing around. And because I forgot that I was having to be cautious. Actually, the DM did pick up on this. I just sort of bandied through. I ended up being kidnapped by some orcs that were just sort of around that corner, and then unfortunately, I was violated to death. Had to roll lots of death saving throws on orcs who wanted to get to know me very well, shall we say. And sadly, Yuri died in a horrible way in that mine because I wasn't fully imagining where I was. That was for a couple of months ago now, and since then I've been revisiting this all the time. Always be imagining, ABI, if you want to do that. Always be imagining, and it does help. It helps you to do stealth and investigation and just have a sense of the atmosphere much more effectively. So imagination, engage that noggin, because otherwise you're gonna just stumble into horrible situations without really meaning to. I mean, arguably my DM was being a bit cruel there, but actually he was trying to encourage me to think, what would Yuri actually be doing if he was going down this tunnel in a mine? So imagination, crucial. Number 5, never be afraid to think outside the box. This is somewhat related, I suppose, to number 4 in terms of imagination. But hopefully, if you're imagining the situation that you're in and the possibilities of the world around you, you're going to come up with solutions and answers and cheeky suggestions that even your DM won't necessarily think of. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we were dragged in front of the hierarch of the city, a sort of a policeman, commissioner, military type of person, a very stern individual who gave us a secret mission, which actually we're still on this mission at the moment in the campaign. But it was crucial as part of this mission that no one else in the city knew that we were working for him. Even his own guards wouldn't give us any help or any favour. We had to do this very much on the down low. And so I thought, well, how can we best achieve that? And again, as sort of thinking as the bard, as the sort of the experienced traveller who's seen different situations and tells stories, I said, well, in that case, do us a favour. Chuck us in jail. Very publicly, drag us through the streets of the city and plonk us in the prison. And I saw the DM get very excited at this prospect. Yes, he said. And that's exactly what happened. And we were able then to escape fairly quickly. The guards in the prison weren't in on this, and crucially, we saved face with the people that we've been asked to investigate. They think actually that we are on their side as opposed to on the side of the hierarch. And actually, in the case of our tiefling, she's not really on anyone's side other than her own. She's a bit of a treasure hound, but but crucially, just by thinking outside the box, thinking about I suppose almost the socio-political reality of the situation that we're in, out of that came this little story beat, a story moment that was crucial to actually where we are now in our campaign. So it is related to number 4, imagination, and I suppose that is also related to playing as your character, I suppose. But each of these things are 3 separate, increasingly complex notions, I guess. Construct your character and try to play as them. Use your imagination to put your character in a situation, and then beyond that, think outside the box. Be creative with your character in that situation. Don't necessarily do what your character would do in a level-headed state. Sometimes maybe your character could become very upset, and play them like that. Think outside the box is something that I've definitely learned, and definitely is a satisfying element of playing Dungeons and Dragons. And one more bonus suggestion for these 5, or I suppose 6 ideas, is that sometimes death can be a welcome break. When my dwarven bard died so horribly in the mines, I actually had to take on playing as a local dwarf living in High Hasper, a guy called Granrak, who was a grumpy mountain dwarf, in fact, not a hill dwarf, like Yuri, who had a similar set of skills, but also a different, more powerful magic set, very much geared towards healing and being fulfilling a very specific function in a group. And as the dragon emerged from the mountain, and our party had to fight off waves of orcs attacking a village while a dragon battle happened overhead, playing as Granrak was actually a very welcome perspective on playing as Yuri. It gave me, as a new D&D player, who so far I've only had one character, Yuri the Dwarven Bard, Granrak was a subtle shift, still a dwarf, but nonetheless helped me to understand a little bit more about the mechanics of playing the game. It was like driving someone else's car for a bit and learning, actually, there's lots of commonality, but also maybe a different car has some possibilities. Or indeed, I didn't realise that the cars could do this. Maybe when I get back into my car, I'll try doing a donut or a handbrake turn. You know what I mean? The point is sometimes being dead, or mostly dead, as it were, it turns out that we're able to resurrect Yuri back at Procampa, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can also offer the possibility of a bit of a holiday, a bit of a weekend away with another character, or in this case, a sort of an NPC which was assigned to me for the battle. Yeah, there you go. So six things that I've learned since I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Now, some of you will be veteran D&D players, and lots of that will just be obvious to you and won't really need explaining. But hopefully this video has been interesting and or entertaining in some capacity. I suppose one final thing I would say is it's also probably a good idea to become familiar with as many aspects of the player's manual as possible as well. It opens up possibilities for your character, gives you inspiration for maybe other characters you might play as. Again, it just enriches the world, especially if you know, for example, how much say a piece of leather costs, this kind of thing. You can sort of barter with people in stores and whatever. So a little bit like keeping a notebook, enriching that world with a little bit of research, I think has also paid dividends. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.